Hi, my name is Karen Dorsey, and thanks for taking time to pause and ponder. Attack, Grand! From the time my grandsons were very young, they really enjoyed attacking grandma in some fashion. And sometimes, oftentimes, that meant getting their weapons out and going, pew, 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 pew. And I would get my weapon right back out and I would say, pew, 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 right back at them. And by the way, the correct sound is pew, pew. I have never, ever heard a little boy say pow, pow. But everything would go great until I got the upper hand. And when I got the upper hand, somehow, all of a sudden, they had a secret weapon that they would pull out, which was often a force field that would go up. And it would neutralize any power I had over them and decimate that power. Well, did you know that we all have a secret weapon for emotional healing? Yes, we do. And we all have access to it. It's called forgiveness. Now, you might wonder why I would equate emotional healing with forgiveness. Well, if you stop and think about it, oftentimes, probably most often, emotional woundedness comes from another person. They have betrayed us or rejected us, humiliated us, criticized us in some fashion. And when that happens, our natural reaction is hurt, which turns into anger. And that's, again, very normal and natural and okay as long as you can deal with that and process through it in a short amount of time. But when you can't and it burrows into your heart, it turns into bitterness. Bitterness that rehearses over and over again what a victim you are and how terrible the other person is. And unforgiveness and bitterness are not fun to be around. I don't know if you've ever been around somebody who was very bitter, but I have. And I'm here to tell you that they get a distorted view of life. They get condemning, caustic, sarcastic, and just plain mean and nasty. And because of that, it isolates valuable connections that they have. And then they become even more bitter. Unforgiveness can cause depression, stress, anxiety. It's even been linked to physical conditions. So it's not a good thing. In fact, in the Bible, God warns us about unforgiveness. He knew how destructive it could be. And so in many places, including in Ephesians 4:32, Jesus says, forgive just as Christ has forgiven you. When I think about all that Christ has forgiven me, it puts things into a whole new perspective. And I realize that none of us is perfect. And it makes me more willing to forgive other people. But stop and think about it. How do we forgive? Step one is pretty obvious and kind of what I just stated. You have to want to. And frankly, sometimes we don't want to. We have been so hurt, or somebody has wounded a child of ours or some other loved one. And we just say, nope, not gonna do it. Not ready. Or we might even say, not ever. In Philippians 2:13, it says that God himself works in us to will and to work his good pleasure. And he's already told us to forgive others. But he can also work in our hearts to make us want to. That's what that means, to will. That means to want to. So step one, if you're not ready to want to, is to ask God to make you want to. I have experienced that before. I know it's possible. The next step is to actually forgive. Well, so how do we do that? From my experience, I would say that it's only partly effective to say something vague and general like, God, I choose to forgive Brutus. Somehow that doesn't deal with all of the emotion that's in here. And so we end up having to come back to it again and again and again because the hurt really hasn't been neutralized. I've heard people describe that like being layers of an onion, and you just have to forgive one layer. And then later on, you forgive another layer and another layer and another layer. But I'm here to tell you that I learned a better way that actually chops up the whole onion all at once. And that was from this book by Lisa Turkeurst, Forgiving What You Can't Forget. And in the book, she shares how she learned to list all of the offenses of a particular person that she was trying to forgive. As she would list each offense, she would put them on a little card and be very specific. Then she would say something more like this: God, I choose to forgive Brutus for continually berating me and calling me stupid. And whatever my emotions don't allow for, I place under the blood of Jesus. Then she would take a piece of red felt and she would put it over the top of that card. And she would continue to the next card until she had dealt with all of the offenses from that person. By doing that, each thing that had been an arrow inside was dealt with and healed. I did the same thing with a little bit of a variation. I didn't want to write it all out on separate cards, so I typed a list on my computer, and I did the same thing. I had probably 30 or 40 situations from one particular issue, and I did the same thing. God, I choose to forgive Brutus for continually calling me stupid and worthless. And whatever my emotions don't allow for, I place under the blood of Jesus. Then I highlighted that in red on my list. I had to go back to maybe one or two out of those issues, but 30 or 40, they were just gone. It was done. I took the time to work through and process with the Lord those hurts. And when I said, I forgive, it was gone. And all the emotional damage that had been caused from those, they disappeared. They were neutralized, I should say. They didn't disappear. I could still dig them up if I wanted to, but their power over me was broken. Now, you might ask, well, if that same person keeps doing horrible things, how many times do I have to forgive them? God knew we'd have that question too. And he tells us in Matthew 18 to forgive 70 times 7. Or in other words, don't count, just keep on forgiving. But please let me caution you that if you're in a situation where it feels unsafe and you're continually being emotionally wounded, to seek help, because that goes far beyond the scope of this video. So, folks, I hope that you will be like my grandsons and you will pull out your secret weapon and allow forgiveness to decimate the power that bitterness has over you and to begin to bring emotional healing so that you can start to rebuild healthy emotions. And that sounds like a great title for another video later on. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please hit like or subscribe. Thanks.